You know I'm sad because you're not subscribing to my channel. But okay, let's enjoy the story. The night sky over the Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly, the stars flickering like distant fireflies in the darkness. Flight 717, a routine red-eye from Lagos to New York, cruised at 35,000 feet, its passengers dozing in their seats, lulled by the steady hum of the engines. Captain David Okoro glanced at his co-pilot, Maria Jensen, who was reviewing their flight plan. "Smooth so far," he murmured, sipping his coffee. "Let's hope it stays that way." Maria nodded, but something in her expression seemed tense. "ATC says there's some unusual weather forming ahead, but it doesn't look severe. Just keep an eye on it." David switched the radar display, frowning as a patch of interference flickered over the screen. Static crackled in his headset. "New York Center, this is Flight 717. We're picking up some unusual radar activity. Can you confirm?" Silence. David tried again. "New York Center, do you copy?" More static. Then a faint voice came through, barely audible. "Flight 717, you're off course." David and Maria exchanged uneasy glances. The instruments showed they were exactly where they should be, but the radio crackled again, and this time, the voice was eerily distorted. "Turn back." A shiver ran down Maria's spine. What was that? Some kind of interference? Before David could answer, the plane jolted violently. Passengers screamed as the aircraft lurched sideways, as if something invisible had grabbed it. Warning alarms blared in the cockpit. "Losing altitude!" Maria shouted. David gripped the controls, trying to steady the aircraft. The sky outside the cockpit window was no longer normal. It had turned an unnatural shade of deep indigo, and the stars seemed wrong. "This isn't turbulence," David muttered. "Something's pulling us." Then in a blink, the cockpit lights flickered, and the world outside the windows changed. The deep blue void was gone. Instead, they were flying over an unfamiliar landscape, one that shouldn't exist in the middle of the Atlantic. Below them stretched a vast expanse of land, dotted with flickering lights and enormous structures that gleamed under a sky filled with unfamiliar constellations. Maria gasped, "Where are we?" David checked the navigation system, but it was blank. No coordinates, no signals, nothing. The altimeter spun wildly. Suddenly, a voice clear and calm filled the cockpit, not from the radio, but from somewhere inside their own minds. "You were not meant to come here." David and Maria stiffened. "Who are you?" David demanded, his voice shaking. "A mistake was made," the voice continued. "You have crossed a boundary that was never meant to be crossed. We will return you, but you must not speak of this." Before they could respond, the plane lurched again. The strange landscape outside blurred, the sky darkened, and a deafening rush of wind filled the cabin. Then, silence. The familiar blinking lights of New York City appeared below them. Maria checked the instruments. "David, we're right on course." The time on the dashboard showed only a few minutes had passed, yet the fuel gauge indicated they'd burned hours worth of fuel. David glanced at Maria, his hand still gripping the controls. "Did that just happen?" she whispered. Neither of them spoke as they landed at JFK Airport. When they finally disembarked, they were met by confused ground crew. "You're early," a flight dispatcher remarked. "By almost an hour. How did you make such good time?" David and Maria exchanged a look. "Must have been a good tailwind," David said quietly. Neither of them ever spoke of what happened that night, but sometimes when David flew over the Atlantic, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching.